All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us for the Michigan Lakes and Streams Association's 60th Annual Conference. We want to thank our sponsors for supporting this free event. I am Melissa DeSimone, the Executive Director of MLSA, and you are in a session here with Conan Smith from the Michigan Environmental Council. So he's going to talk to us about some things that Michigan Environmental Council is doing that benefits our lakes and streams. They're doing some good work over there. You will notice that your camera and your microphone are turned off. That is to eliminate any background noise. And as far as your camera, if you keep that off, that will help you with any connection issues that you might have. So just keep that in mind. Also, we are happy to take questions during the session. Conan would like to, he's got his presentation in sections, so there will be some time for some questions throughout and then some at the end. So please feel free to use the chat to write in any questions that you may have for him, and I will help him make sure that we get to as many of those as we can. And then also, I would like to introduce our speaker. We have Conan Smith joining us today. Conan is the president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council. He's an Ann Arbor native, and he took his role with MEC in May of 2019. But he also worked with the organization from 1998 to 2004. Conan previously served for 12 years as Executive Director of Metro Matters, a Southeast Michigan nonprofit. He also served for 12 years. Oh, wait, sorry, I'm reading the same thing again. He also currently lectures on intergovernmental cooperation at Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan. He served for 14 years as an elected county commissioner and has also served in leadership positions on numerous public and private boards, including state level appointments by both Governor Jennifer Granholm and Governor Rick Snyder. He is currently a board member of Michigan Saves, Michigan Recreation and Parks Association, Michigan Works Association, and the Pigeon River County Advisory Committee. So we welcome you today, Conan. Thank you so much for joining us. And I am going to stop sharing and turn it over to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. And Melissa, thank you so much. I was really excited for this invitation in particular because of our new relationship between your organization and mine. The Lakes and Streams Association joined MEC as a member last year. And this is a really opportune moment for me to share with you all what MEC is, what we do, and how we all might build a stronger partnership together. So I hope you will think of this not as a presentation from Conan about what to do, but more like, hey, here's what MEC is and the role that we want to play in the environmental movement. How can we be better partners to you, and how can you leverage the tools and expertise that we have, and vice versa. At the end of the day, we only win on environmental issues if we are working collaboratively and showing our force as a citizenry that cares about protecting our water, our air, and our land. So please, today, let's consider this a joint exploration of what the relationship between the Michigan Lakes and Streams Association and the Michigan Environmental Council might look like. I'm going to throw up some slides here just to entertain you. They are not great, and my slides are rarely informative. So you won't miss anything if you're just wandering around the house drinking coffee, listening to our voices today. My role at MEC is pretty unusual for executive directors of this organization who over our 40-year history have been environmental policy experts. My predecessor, Chris Kolb, was a state lawmaker, and he is an environmental scientist. His predecessor, Lana Pollock, was a state senator and a state representative who went on to lead the International Joint Commission protecting the boundary waters. Before her, Dave Dempsey, who some of you may know, who was an environmental advisor to Governor Blanchard and is a renowned water expert, was our executive director. We have had some big brains on public policy and water policy at our helm. For some reason, the board of directors in their last search for a CEO decided that they didn't want that kind of leadership anymore. They needed somebody who was more oriented at just building organizations. So in me, you're going to hear me talk more about how we build this movement, how we collaborate together more effectively. And the policy work that I do is really sort of high level. It's about talking to our allies about their visions and their values. It's about sharing the broad brush strokes of bills that are moving in the Capitol. And I am fortunate inside our shop to have a very deep bench of public policy experts in our policy team. So we have attorneys on staff who work on land protection, water protection, and public health. We have environmental scientists who cover drinking water and ground and surface water protection, energy, renewable energy, housing, things like that. So our staff are the people that we can connect you to make sure that you have a really strong understanding of the nuances of public policy. I say most of this to help you understand if you pose questions to me today that I can't answer, I'm just going to go back to that team and get the answers for you. And then I will take note of that today and send those back to Melissa, and hopefully she can share them out with folks after the talk. As Melissa said, I've broken today's discussion into a couple of parts, well, 3 parts. First, I want to share with you what the Michigan Environmental Council is. You are, as a group now, a member of MEC that comes with certain opportunities and rights. It lets you avail yourself of tools that we have inside our shop. And I want to talk a little bit about MEC as an organization, as an institution, and then break a little bit and banter with you all about how we can be helpful in that institutional perspective. Then I want to share a little bit about how we work. We do really 2 big things. We build the movement of organizations working on environmental issues, and then we advocate for really good public policy. I'm going to share 2 case studies around public policy over the last legislative cycle. One, the successful ballot campaign that we coordinated statewide for expanding and strengthening the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. And then one, Seth, that we were not so successful on, and that is getting a statewide septic code and sort of deconstruct why one worked and one didn't, and talk about why we need to build a stronger movement to get better protections in place. And then I'm going to wrap up talking about a handful of current public policies that we're working on in Lansing at the Capitol, and the different ways that we approach policy advocacy. That includes direct advocacy around legislation that we'd like to see moving in the Capitol, working with partners external to Lansing to create market incentives for good practices, and doing sort of standard political coordinated organizing work across the movement as well. And so I'll go through each of those areas and break for questions. One set of questions and discussion on what MEC is as an organization. One set of questions and discussion on how we do work collectively that gives us greater impact. And then the last set of questions on the specific water policy priorities that we're working on in the Capitol as we go along. So that's the frame for the next little while. And I will do my best not to like bore you guys. And I'm going to pull up the chat just to make sure that I'm monitoring that. And I think that's where Melissa said throw throw questions that you have in the chat as we go along. And Melissa, are folks able to come off of camera and mic and ask questions directly?
Yeah, if you would like to do that, that would be perfectly fine. We have about 63 people in today, so you know, I mean, as long as that works out, I'm happy to let
Great.
that be the format. Mhm.
I would love that. I really enjoy just talking with people. So y'all, if you want to jump in as part of the conversation, please do. As Melissa's pointing out, there's a lot of us on here, so we'll have to be respectful of each other and not talk over everyone.
Yeah,
But
I think the best way to do that is if you go down to where it says reactions at the bottom of your screen, you can click raise hand, and then we'll know that you know, you can unmute yourself and hit raise hand, and then we'll let you know that we're ready. And that way, I think it'll help with that.
great. And it looks like I'm screen sharing. Can you see that, Melissa?
Yes, it's wonderful. I like that picture, actually.
I stole it. But it's the only one I stole. The rest of them are from the MEC archives. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about MEC. We have been in existence since the 1980s, so we're in our 41st year. And MEC was assembled back in 1980 in what I think of as a pretty interesting way. Bill Rustum, whom some of you may know, was environmental advisor to Bill Milliken at the time, Governor Milliken. And he had sort of decided that he was done with state government and he wanted to move on and do something else. And he announced his retirement from the governor's office at the ripe age of something like 24. And Hugh McDermott Sr., at the time a prominent columnist, opinion writer with the Detroit Free Press and News, he wrote an op-ed bemoaning Bill's departure, saying that while Governor Milliken himself and the First Lady were great champions of environmental protection, there was one quiet voice inside the administration that was steadily compelling public policy on environment and conservation issues to move forward, and it was Bill Milliken. And as McDermott described it, he said the environmental community has lost its greatest champion inside the administration, but we've also sort of seen through this degree of activism the pride that Michiganders have in their natural areas and the opportunities that are present for public policy to protect and preserve them. And what needed to happen, if these environmentalists had any sense in their heads, is they would get together and form something like the Michigan Environmental Council. He actually wrote that in this column. And lo and behold, just months later, a handful of organizations that included the Sierra Club, the Detroit and Flint Audubon Societies, 6 organizations all told, did get together, and they said, we have got to have more consistent, steady representation in Lansing. There are policies moving that we all care about, but none of us have the capacity to be the Lansing-based organization. And it's a long drive. So why don't we get somebody who can be in Lansing with us full time? One of our founding members was the West Michigan Environmental Action Council, and their director at the time, Ken Sikkema, was working with this fellow, Grant Trigger. Grant is an environmental attorney, and they hired him to be MEC's first lobbyist. I don't think they even called him the noble term executive director. They were just like, you're our hired gun, go get him. And so the Michigan Environmental Council was born. 6 organizations and a lobbyist hustling in Lansing on environmental policy issues. That idea really caught fire. There were organizations across the state, large and small, that felt that need for representation in the Capitol. And very quickly, the body of members at MEC grew. It includes now statewide organizations like Clean Water Action and the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. It includes issue-specific groups like Muskegon Tomorrow, or Muskegon. My goodness, isn't it terrible when your brain just dies? Anyway, let me skip that for a second. Just say it includes very issue-specific organizations who are working on public policies to protect a particular species or to engage in a particular niche in the environmental community, like the Stewardship Network, which is a national group, but what they focus on is preventing invasive species incursion in Michigan. And it includes very localized organizations, right down to the sort of neighborhood block club level. So just groups of good citizens working at all levels of environmental protection to make sure that our public policies are strong and that they're being implemented well and fairly throughout the state. That becomes a critical part of the advocacy effort and underlying foundation for any successes that we are ultimately able to garner in Lansing. MEC staff simultaneously grew. So from that one executive director, particularly in the 1990s and 2000s under the leadership of Lana Pollock, the organization grew to be quite a force for public policy research and advocacy. We're now currently a staff of 16. As I mentioned before we got going, MEC has a cadre of public policy experts who work on water issues, energy issues, health issues, land conservation issues. They include both attorneys with public policy expertise and environmental scientists who can dig into the data. We have on our team great communication staff members and a growing strength in the area of messaging, public opinion research, so that we can understand how to touch the citizenry of Michigan and mobilize them, activate them in defense of the environment. And we have a growing engagement staff, a team of individuals whose job it is to understand how the movement grows, how the environmental movement strengthens, where there are opportunities for connections to be made, and how to pull organizations together so that we can take action together collectively and move public policies forward. Over the last year, we also added some additional campaigning capacity. We spun off a new 501c4 organization. It's an advocacy organization designed to do ballot campaigns. And we'll talk a little bit about proposal 1 and how we wrangled that effort. But we kept the campaign expertise in-house for that. Becca Marr, who was the campaign manager, is now a full-time staffer at MEC. We'll send her over in 2022 back to the 501c4 so that we can do additional ballot campaigns. But one of the things that we learned through the process of creating our 501c4 is that there is not a clear dedicated arm for environmental ballot questions that is steadily available and sort of dedicated to building up that kind of expertise. And now we've got that as well. So that's the basic shape of the organization. Let me tell you a little bit also about how we do our work. So MEC is an advocacy organization in the Capitol, but our goal is not just to nag lawmakers to do the things that we want them to do. It's to figure out ways that we inspire innovative environmental policy in the Capitol, but also in practice on the ground with local governments, with farmers and industry leaders, with regular citizens. We do a lot of public policy research, both to make sure that we're advocating for the best possible things in the Capitol, but also so that we have a strong sense of where the next innovation in policy might derive from. And the second thing we do is we build the movement. We pull together these organizations and we foster collaboration in ways that give our elected officials the confidence to take those inspired leadership positions and leap forward. Let's see, I think that's a good place for us to pause. I've laid out for you our two major focus areas. So one, representing folks in the Capitol and making sure that public policy voice is heard, and two, building the movement. I've talked about the three ways that we currently do our business. The first of those being to advocate in the Capitol for policy. That's basically a lobbying function. The second is via communications, making sure that we're designing powerful, resonant messages that folks around the state can use to talk to decision makers. And the third is to do the engagement work that makes us a strong movement, strong and connected movement. I see a bunch of questions in the chat, so let's take a few minutes here and answer those. And if you have additional questions, I think that it'd be great if somebody tested the hand raising approach. Let's see if we can.
Well, count on my my husband to do so. His hand is raised. So.
Okay. Oh yeah, there I see it. Excellent. And then let's see if I do this. Melissa, I don't actually have control over the participants.
Okay, that's fine. So
can you do that?
Do you want, okay, so do you want to, I mean, we could probably just ask Craig to unmute and then he can ask his question if you want to do it that way.
Okay, yeah, Craig, come on in.
Well, thank you, Conan. I was listening, so I heard you. You wanted some human interaction. It's clear to me the relationship that could or should exist between MEC and MLSA. It's a little less clear to me, you know, as the president of the Gravel Lake Association, like what, if any, is the relationship between an organization like mine and MEC. I think someone did ask a question about what membership types are available, but I guess is it appropriate that I'm interacting, or do I use MLSA as my liaison?
Absolutely. Either way works for you and works for us. In terms of membership, MEC's membership structure right now has a tiered dues structure that runs from basically free if you're like a little neighborhood organization that doesn't have any kind of budget, up to $1,000 if you're one of these statewide or national organizations. I have a proposal in front of my board of directors in 2 weeks that will change that and make our membership dues a flat $100, knowing that the more organizations that we have involved, the more people that we're coordinating with on environmental policy, the better. And in terms of sort of proving that you want to be that you are an appropriate member to MEC, our bar is really low. You have to be a legitimate organization doing legitimate environmental work, and that's pretty much it. And then we will welcome you to the table. When I say legitimate organizations doing legitimate work, it's really our filter that we put applicants through is basically like, I don't know what you call these organizations, but sometimes corporations will stand up false citizen organizations. They'll create 501c3s that are like, you know, citizens for the neighborhood polluter, and call themselves an environmental organization and pretend to be citizen-based groups. And we look really carefully for that kind of infiltration and guard against it. But it's only happened once or twice in our history that someone has tried to pull the wool over our eyes in that way. Most of the time, it's organizations like yours, Craig, who are looking for stronger connections to the Capitol and to be linked in with other similar organizations. You know, specifically thinking about your organization, we are very active working on mining policy and what happens to gravel mines and gravel pits after they've been abandoned by the owners. And so that might be an area where we have great synergy, actually. And I know our public policy director, Sean Hammond, would love to engage you in that. So membership, hopefully.
Perhaps our lake name is misleading, but that's not a topic for us, but I think that answers my question, Conan. A, we could become a member, B, that's probably the best way to support your organization, if we, believe in it, which everything I've heard, very supportive. So great.
So the great thing about membership, and Melissa, I hope you and I get to explore this more, is that you have a stronger hand as MEC members in setting the environmental priorities, the agenda priorities for our advocacy work in the Capitol than the sort of at-large community does. We have regular sessions with our members that we engage you and ask you what your priorities are, and those become our biannual priorities for the current legislative session. We host meetings. For example, we have a quarterly meeting with the director of Eagle and a quarterly meeting with the Water Resources Division director, and give our members access to those to make sure that you have the ability to bring your issues right to the decision makers. And of course, we pride ourselves on knowing how the Capitol works. And if you've got a bill that needs to move, or you want to understand why a bill isn't moving, which is frankly more often than the case, we're sort of the go-to experts in that space and can help you get the lay of the land in the Capitol.
One more build, Conan.
Oh, go ahead, Conan.
Sorry, Melissa. I see Melissa, my wife. Conan, there's a variety of organizations around water quality that are lobbying in the Capitol. Are you guys coordinating, or are these separate efforts? How do you address that when I can think of at least 3 or 4 that have similar mandates, and also, you can be a member of each?
Yeah, I like to think that we're very coordinated. Sometimes we're not as coordinated as I like to think, but generally, when there's a public policy issue, the environmental community that's working in the Capitol stays in conference with each other, especially as things start to move out of committees and onto the floor. So there are a handful of active full-time lobbyists for environmental issues in the Capitol: Clean Water Action, Sierra Club, a Michigan LCV, folks like that. We have regular conversations with each other, and we coordinate on specific policy issues. I'll give you an example. Right now, we're all working for a policy called Filter First, which would, excuse me, put lead contamination filters at schools and community centers. Our staff is leading the coordination of that particular policy campaign, but it's open to, I think they have 100 different organizations right now who are working on it. On other issues, we're the follower. We will help draw our members into an issue, but we have allies who are more knowledgeable about that particular issue, and we help them by following, by letting them take the lead and providing expertise for them.
And I thought I would just jump in and let everyone know that as members of MEC, MLSA gets very frequent updates from MEC about what is going on. And we attend the quarterly meetings that Conan spoke of. And actually, I went to the annual meeting, which was, I thought, very good. And that's where we sat around and discussed the policies and priorities that MEC would have. So MLSA has already started to be part of those conversations, and I know that there's more that we can do, and that we will keep building that relationship as time goes on. So I thought I'd let everyone know that. And do you want to see what's going on in the chat, Conan?
Yeah.
What do you think? Okay.
Absolutely. So Tricia asked, how can we adequately support adequate funding for Eagle? We're going to have a big campaign over this. So there's a proposal in the Michigan House of Representatives right now that would move Eagle and DNR to quarterly budgets, basically forcing those departments to come back to the legislature every 90 days for their budget. Like Melissa said, I spent 14 years as an elected official, and I can tell you that the trend in public governance and public finance is actually to move in the opposite direction. Oakland County, very conservative county at the time, pioneered this with 2-year budgets. Now we see organizations, governments, moving to 2- and 3-year budgeting processes. Nobody is moving to the 90-day process. The impact of a 90-day budget on Eagle and DNR would be devastating for interests like ours, and I think for the citizenry. So, for example, DNR will probably shut down many parks if they're forced into a quarterly budget, because they're so dependent on seasonal workers. And you can't hire seasonal workers unless you have an authorized budget. And the quarter for the state works out to be, say, in the middle of the summer. So you don't know if you have the budget to keep someone paid in July, August, and September. So that's a big challenge. We'll be reaching out to members like Melissa to articulate how they can engage, who they can communicate with about the need for a full 1-year budget for Eagle. And we need to make sure that that budget increases. This year of all years, that's looking pretty good. There are big dollars that are coming into the department from what we call the bottle bill escheats. So those of us who hoarded a lot of tin cans during the pandemic ended up either throwing them away or recycling, and there's $100 million surplus in that fund currently. State revenues are higher than anticipated, so we're going to have supplemental budgets. And then you all have probably heard about the massive inflow of money from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan, which is going to, I'm trying to do the number in my head. It's $19.5 billion coming into the state. About $5 billion of that is going to be flexible dollars that we should all be competing to make sure go to water protection. So we will definitely be engaging Melissa, and we can connect you all through her network into that advocacy effort. I think I touched on everything in the chat so far. Does anyone else have an issue that you'd like to raise a question about currently about how we do our work?
And don't be shy. It's just a matter of, taking your unmute off, even your video, if you don't mind us seeing your face. And
right on. And Craig, thank you for modeling good behavior there.
My pleasure.
Okay, well, why don't we move on to the next set of things. So I'm going to talk for a minute here about how we do our work. And now I have too many things on my screen. I can't even see my own slides.
I see them. Building a strong movement.
I popped up the chat and the participant list, Melissa, and I blocked my whole screen with them. So I talked already about, like, our goal is to build a stronger movement. And that's not just by counting all of the organizations out there and pulling them into a network. All of that is critically important. There are 1,500 nonprofits across the state of Michigan that call themselves environmental or conservation organizations, according to the IRS. MEC's membership is only about 70 of them. So we're talking about 5% of the potential network that we're actually actively engaging right now. So we've got a huge opportunity to build the advocacy force that can change the public policy environment for environment and conservation issues. We know that when lawmakers hear from individual organizations, that matters to them. But when they hear from a network of individual organizations, it changes the nature of elections. And at that point, they really care about what we have to say. So in our case, as a movement, bigger and more diverse geographically, are really important factors in our success. If I can go into a lawmaker's office and tell them that we have 3 or 4 member organizations who care about these issues, who are resident in their district, and I can bring members from those organizations to that meeting to show them that their own constituents are part of the requests that we're making, we get a lot more traction with lawmakers in that way. And then we're able to create messages, as I said, that become more resonant across the total population. And then we start to win. So I want to give you 2 examples of how this can and should work. The first is this ballot campaign that we all ran last year, and Michigan Lakes and Streams Association was a big part of this. So Melissa, it was fun that was a really fun campaign. I was super excited to engage everybody on it. I think you all are, well, maybe not everybody's familiar with this, but just I'll do a quick recap. Back in 2018 and 2019, excuse me, the environmental and conservation community got together, examined the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund, and saw that there were a couple of limitations in there that we would like to address. One was that if we filled up the State Park Endowment Fund with revenues from oil and gas drilling, at that point, none of that money would go back into conservation. All of it would become general fund dollars expendable by the legislature. We didn't want to see that. We wanted to keep that money flowing into conservation and parks and recreation activities. And so part of the amendment that was on the ballot was to ensure that all future oil and gas extraction revenues went to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. The other thing that was happening is we had spent a lot of our time, energy, and resource over the previous 40 years acquiring pristine and endangered properties of large scale. And large scale properties are mostly available in the rural parts of the state. And the consequence was that there was a disproportionate disinvestment or lack of investment in southern Michigan, in the southern tier of the Lower Peninsula, and in particular around our urban areas. And so people who lived in cities who didn't have ready access to get up north didn't have at hand the experience of nature. And we wanted to make sure that there were more opportunities to support ecological experiences for our residents. The best way that we could do that was by allowing what are called development grants inside the trust fund parlay to become a bigger part of the budget. At the current time, those grants are capped at $300,000, and they used to be capped at 25% total of the expenditures for a year. So many of those grants went to refurbish parks and build trails and things like that that are great, but we were not doing transformational development projects like doing a complete ecological restoration of a riverfront, for example. So collectively, we proposed amendments to the Natural Resources Trust Fund. We had to get those passed by the legislature. And we brought public polling to the lawmakers. We brought a broad coalition that included not just environment and conservation organizations, but parks and rec and local government and industry leaders as well. The legislation to put this on the ballot passed unanimously, one of the rare times where we've seen true bipartisan cooperation. And then, of course, we had to go convince the citizens that this was the right thing to do as well. Well, Michigan's citizenry is predisposed to support environment and conservation issues. It's sort of built into our DNA. But our initial polling only showed that about 60% of the population thought that this was a good idea. Making these changes were a good idea. We had some opposition from within. So, for example, the Sierra Club wanted to see more of these dollars reserved for land purchasing and permanent wilderness conservation. And so they opposed the ballot question. We had to, as a campaign, come up with clear messages that defined what we were doing and why, but we wanted to do that in ways that didn't alienate folks who should be natural supporters, and we didn't want to denigrate people who were opposing us, because we're going to need their alliance in the future. So we had to craft a very careful advertising campaign, political marketing campaign that would allow us to win those hearts and minds. I'm very proud that we did that in collaboration with all of our campaign supporter organizations. So we had more than 60 different nonprofits that joined the campaign and endorsed the ballot question. And we held regular meetings with strategic meetings with them to help shape the messaging and the campaign policy. This year was a little weird politically because of the pandemic, right? Normally we would be out knocking on doors, and we'd had yard signs and a field team and everything like that. But nobody was out knocking and doing field work this year. So it was pretty much a digital only campaign. I'm proud to say that the way we shaped our messages became truly resonant, and it took a very complex issue and simplified it to ways that the citizenry could completely understand. We won that ballot campaign with 84% of the vote. So we moved half of the opposition, initial opposition, to be on our side at the end of the day. We did that by staying positive, by treating the opposition with, I think, kindness and affection, but being really clear about what we thought the facts were and how it would play out. And it turns out that that's an award-winning strategy. We just learned yesterday that the American Association of Political Consultants has awarded our campaign 2 national level awards for ballot campaign marketing and advertising, a gold award and a silver award. So we were literally the best in the nation at this in 2020. So pretty proud of that work. What I take away from an experience like that is that when we have a great issue that touches the values of Michiganders, and when we are able to pull together the right diverse coalition, and then subsequently build messages based on a robust understanding of public opinion and public values, we can win the day with the Michigan citizenry. We have a much tougher challenge when it comes to working with the state legislature. We also would love to see something that I think matters a lot to the Michigan Lakes and Stream Association members, a dramatic reduction in nutrient pollution that is endangering our inland lakes in particular. We've seen a pretty dramatic increase in algal blooms, partly due to climate change, but more directly due to the increase in nutrient runoff, predominantly from agriculture, and to some extent due to failing septic systems across the state of Michigan. One intervention that has been proposed over and over again is simply to adopt a statewide septic code that would compel us to identify where septics are and make inspections on them a regular part of the government processes. Failing septic systems dump the richest of all nutrients into our water systems, and sometimes some really gross things too. I don't know if you've seen any photos of toilet paper running down some of our inland streams, but that really does happen. And it is largely due to the fact that we don't have effective regulation of our rural septic system structure. So we did a similar thing and reached out to organizations who would be impacted by a septic code, tried to build a coalition with a clear message, tried to design public policy that would be effective in its implementation. It was limited in scope. It was cost effective, and we got walloped in the legislature. In the look backwards, a couple of things that I critique there. One, we didn't have strong values-oriented unity amongst our coalition that would allow us to negotiate public policies without fracturing. So in a couple of cases, our organizations broke apart and started fighting against each other. Two, we had not tapped into the value system of Michiganders around this issue. We said, we need a septic code, which is a pretty darn wonky thing to say to any citizen out there, because they don't know what a septic code is. Most of them don't even know what septics are. So we didn't have a clear, strong message. And then we were not able to bring the force of a movement to Lansing to compel passage of an important piece of legislation. Our organizing and engagement effort there was too weak. And so we lost. What I take away from an experience like that is We have the capacity. We see that via ballot questions like the Natural Resources Trust Fund. We can win the hearts and minds of Michigan citizens, but we do not yet have all of the elements of a strong organizational structure that allows us to campaign for significant legislation like a septic code yet in place. So partnering with organizations like the Lakes and Streams Association, one, helps us build up that network of advocates, but two, lets us avail ourselves of two critical things that move Lansing policymakers. One, your own very specific localized expertise. You understand better than anybody else what the impacts of good public policy could be on our inland lakes, for example. And two, you have the stories about when things go wrong. You can really pull the heartstrings of a lawmaker by explaining to them the devastating consequences of polluting an inland lake and how long that lasts and what it does to the homes and the experience of nature in those places. So those are two examples, two basic case studies of how we do our work and why I think we might be able to win more effectively. So again, let's pause there and pick up questions from the chat. If anyone would like to jump in with a hand raise, please do.
All right, I think I saw, let's see here. There was a question from Laura there. Does MEC provide any informational resources to help small 501c3s understand how to work with 501c4s? There's sometimes misunderstanding and hesitancy about engaging in anything that could seem like lobbying, even though a certain amount of advocacy is allowed for 501c3s.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. We do not have a resource toolkit yet around this, but one of the things that we learned through the Proposal 1 campaign is that is really necessary. We've got to build it and share it out broadly. We have allies who have done that in other places. The Michigan Nonprofit Association has a good primer on it. And then there is a national organization that we work with called the Alliance for Justice, who has very robust research and resources available to nonprofits that can guide them through what the difference between a C3, a C4, a PAC, a 527 organization, what all those are and how they can do it. But we don't really have a good go-to resource here in Michigan for environmental organizations who would like to be more politically active. Our hope is that through the Sustainable Michigan Fund, our 501c4, we'll be partnering with the other C4s in the state, LCV, Clean Water Action, Sierra Club, to make sure that those kinds of resources that are targeted to Michiganders are readily available, and then we can filter them out through our membership. So that is a place where we are hoping and expecting to grow.
Okay, I see another one from Chris Geyer from Shavehead Lake. Hi there, Chris. He says, you were discussing creating and enhancing public lands for nature experiences like parks. Is there a way we could try to incentivize maintaining or restoring natural shorelines? So I think he's talking about like maybe, naturally improving some of those areas as well.
Yeah, and this is a place where I think there is enormous opportunity for partnership with Lakes and Streams Association and other allies. We won the ballot campaign for Proposal 1, and there's a lot more money available for those kinds of projects now, except there's no more money available for those kinds of projects right now. Because at this point, the DNR and the Trust Fund Board have not changed the scoring rubric for grants. So we're basically funding the same thing this year that we funded the year before and the year before and the year before. Now, DNR is open to a process for looking at the scoring rubric and making additional changes that would facilitate those kinds of investments, but they're keeping that a little bit in-house. And we are actively ginning up a conversation with the Protect Michigan Coalition, which is the Nature Conservancy, Michigan Parks and Recreation Association, Michigan Trails and Greenways Association, Michigan United Conservation Clubs, and MEC, so that we can start campaigning to the DNR and to the Trust Fund Board to make these kinds of changes. That's probably going to take 12 to 18 months. And so there is rich opportunity for you all to engage with us in elevating the values that we want that scoring rubric to represent, and the specific types of projects that we think deserve more and better investment. So now is the right time to jump in with us on this. And Melissa, I assume they can do that through you.
Yes. Yes, I'd be happy to be the funnel for that information. That would be really good. All right, and then we have a septic question as well. While there's strong agreement among environmental interests to enact a septic code, there is very strong opposition at the statewide to a statewide code among rural governments, realtors, and other non-environmental groups. How do you see bringing those groups to the table, as we need them on board in order to get anything passed?
Yeah, so this is one of the ways that I'm trying to change how MEC articulates its public policy work. What we have done in the past, I'll back up 2 steps and give you just one little insight into my background. My master's degree is in dispute resolution, and the organization that I ran before I came to MEC, Metro Matters, our job was to facilitate partnerships and coalition development between the city of Detroit and the inner ring suburbs. And believe me, suburbs and city do not get along very frequently. So I was about 6 years into my work there, and we grabbed all the low-hanging fruit, and we were trying to get into really big substantive issues. And I found that we were unable to do that because we didn't understand well how to negotiate. So I took a negotiation class that led to a master's degree in dispute resolution. One of the learnings that I took away from that experience was we shape our public policy right now around positions. We say we want policy X to pass, and then we fight for policy X. When what we really need to be doing better is shaping our public policy around our interests and our values. We need to articulate what values drive us to call for a particular policy, what principles would apply, what are the rules, the sort of guideposts that we need in place, what we would find acceptable in terms of a public policy framework, and then articulate what the action is, the actual bill that we want passed. By establishing that kind of a framework, it allows us not to get hung up on the bill, not to get hung up on the particular action, because someone might have another action that gets us, that fulfills the right principles and gets us to the value that we ultimately want to see realized through public policy. Our negotiations to this date on many environmental policies have not allowed us to have those kinds of diverse and interesting conversations with parties that find themselves generally in opposition to our approach. So what we are hoping to do is a broader process of discovery around public policy options that would get us to the place where we are identifying where septic systems have been put in place, supporting people in the maintenance of those systems so that they don't pollute our water. The Nature Conservancy, we work very closely with TNC on this kind of thing. TNC's leadership, I think, would say, we're not sure that a septic code is actually the right answer. We're examining septic codes around the nation and then asking the question, did the implementation of a statewide septic code actually result in fewer effluents, less effluents being poured into the inland lakes and streams? And the initial research there says no. So that means like we're not designing the right public policy intervention to get to the right outcome. And so we need to, I think, Seth, back up a couple of steps, really do some strong articulation of those values, because I think we'll find common agreement from local governments, from rural homeowners, from well and septic people around that value system. Then talk about those principles, what are the guideposts, and then maybe we can design win-win solutions that get more people on board.
I think that sounds great. And we've got a lot of affirmation in the chat about that. Okay, I think we have one more question about membership. So I know you talked a lot about groups becoming members. Is there individual membership, or is it strictly like a partnership group based
So our membership structure is only for organizations, but we have, we welcome individual supporters. So we have about 600 individuals who are supporters of MEC. We maintain listservs as well, so we keep individuals up to date on the things that are going on in the policy environment. It is a less formal relationship between an individual and the organization. An individual in MEC. An organization like Michigan Lakes and Streams Association, being a member, gives certain rights. So Michigan Lakes and Streams elects our board members, for example. So, and our board is made up, 50% of our board is made up of representatives from those member organizations, Melissa. So they're just it's sort of a more formal relationship, organization to organization, and there are rights that come with that. As individuals, certainly, like, we support our supporters as well. So and frankly, we never turn anybody who's a good environmentalist away. If you have a question or need help on something, I was on a call this morning with a couple of folks who were trying to protect Wampler's Lake from a development and the wetlands over there. I hope we can be of support to them as well. And they're not an organization, and they're not a member of MEC even. So, like all of us.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Well, and I think this group and everyone who's a member of MLSA is by proxy a member of MEC.
That's right.
We can represent your interests with the MEC